nervous because I'm here now.
You hit record?
Yep.
All right. Welcome in, everybody, to another episode of 410 Sports Talk. I'm Glenn Martin. I'm here with my co-host, James Haskell. And in this episode, we're going to discuss the thinning tight end position for your Baltimore Ravens and what should the Ravens do to address that. We recently saw Jacob Breeland, the undrafted free agent out of Oregon, who was expected to certainly compete for that third tight end spot, decided he wasn't going to play this season due to recovering from a pretty bad knee injury and I believe also maybe some COVID-19 concerns. So it's leaving that position that was pretty much maybe their strongest last year, and it's looking pretty thin this year. I mean, you're good at the top. You got Mark Andrews, who's obviously ascending the ranks of tight ends in the league. And then Nick Boyle, who is one of, if not the best blocking tight end in the league, and also a horse to bring down with some pretty decent hands also. So, but after that, it gets really, really thin. I mean, right now they got Charles Scarf, who was on the practice squad last season, and they have Eli Wolf, another undrafted free agent coming out of Georgia. So right now, those are the only two competing for that third spot. Jimmy, who else is out there that maybe the Ravens could bring in that could help fill that role?
Yeah, there's a couple names that I think are worth mentioning. And one thing, just to add what you're saying, Glenn, it's so crazy to think that, like you said, we made that trade for Hayden Hurst. You know, we traded him away, but we got thin so fast. And especially considering we probably need 4 guys we can rely on the field based on our reliance of the tight ends. So with that in mind, I wouldn't be surprised if we bring in more than one name, at least into camp, right? So anyway, a couple names. Charles Clay is worth mentioning. He's 31 years old. And of course, he's familiar with Greg Roman's system, playing up in Buffalo under him. And then, of course, you got Jordan Reed, who has those concussion issues. But, I mean, he's been a talented player when he's been healthy. Another name, you got Delaney Walker, I think is worth mentioning. Also familiar with Greg Roman's system. You know, they were there in San Francisco at the same time. And then also a former guy of the Baltimore Ravens, former third-round pick, if I'm not mistaken, Ed Dixon, who, if we know Ed can do one thing, he can block. So he's also available. Now, like I said, there are other names out there, but I think that those 4 are worth mentioning and focusing on. So are there any of those 4, Glenn, that you know, pique your interest a little bit and say, you know what, this might be worth turning over a rock here, see what we got?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's important that they at least bring someone in to compete and to help, you know, share some of the snaps and share some of the workload because I think they were counting on Breeland to do that. But the next thing I think about is you have a shortened offseason, not a lot of time for a guy to learn a completely new system. So to me, I think the list gets cut. That list that you gave gets cut in half to Delaney Walker and Charles Clay just because they're familiar with the system.
Right.
Obviously, Delaney played with Greg Roman when he led them to the Super Bowl when the Ravens took care of business. And then and then Charles Clay played under Greg Roman in Buffalo and he had his best season. So I look at these two guys, and I see, you know, Delaney Walker's 36, Charles Clay's 31. They both have had injury concerns as of late. Delaney Walker, you have to go back to 2017 before you see a season in which he was able to, you know, play the majority of the season and be productive. Now, that's not too terribly long ago, but in football terms, you're talking 3 years. That's a long time in football terms.
That's a whole career.
Yeah, that's the average career. So, but in 2017, I'll say this, he had 74 catches for over 800 yards. So he was very successful in 2017. Charles Clay, he's never reached the heights of success that Delaney did, but he's certainly a guy that, when healthy, can be a good player. But again, it's going to come down to health. Now, I do say this. The Ravens aren't going to ask either one of these guys to come in and be a big contributor. They will be if Boyle and Andrews stay healthy, they will be a very small part of the offense. Now, it's still important. I mean, every part is important. But what I'm saying is they'll be able to manage their snap count to where they're not going to get overloaded with work and risk getting injured again. So I look at those two guys. If I had to decide between the two, I'm a Delaney guy. Even though he's the older guy, he played in that system a long time. He's a guy that can do both things. He can block and he can go down and catch the ball. I like that versatility. I think that's what we're losing when we traded away Hayden Hurst to the Falcons. You need a guy that can do both. You can't just bring in a specialist. And I think Delaney can do both. He knows the offense. He's a good guy in the locker room. At least bring him in and let him compete. And if he doesn't make it, then you cut him. I mean, you don't have to bring him in a very high, I wouldn't imagine you have to give him any guarantees at this point.
Right. No, I'm with you as well. That's a great point you bring up about, whittling that list down to just those two because of the truncated offseason that we're working with and the limited time we have to get out on the field. So that's a great point. Between those two, I like your point about Delaney. I've always been a Delaney guy because I feel like in San Francisco he was a real glue guy for them, and he kind of did everything. I remember they would line him up in the backfield, they would line him up, as a fullback, tight end, everywhere. And he did everything and kind of went unnoticed until he got that payday in Tennessee. And to think about that, catching 74 passes and 800 yards from Marcus Mariota.
Yeah.
Imagine doing
imagine
Lamar
with Lamar,
right?
Who nobody targets the tight ends more than Lamar.
Right. So, and I'll tell you what, Delaney is significantly older, but this is what I will say. I think that Greg Roman can depend on him in a third down scenario where a lot of people, say as far as like deception goes, the play looks the same, but it's Delaney out there instead of Mark Andrews. Well, teams are automatically going to think, well, Delaney's probably not getting the ball. Right. And I think at the same time, the Ravens can rely on him to make those plays and those big moments. And we're a relatively young team, so it'd be nice to bring in a vet of his caliber. So I'm with you. I mean, obviously, Jordan Reed, I think his career's over. That's just me.
Too many concussions, man.
Yeah, I don't think teams want to touch that, and they want him speaking full sentences by the time he retires, right?
Yeah, I mean, that's the hope for all of them. I think that what we should say though is that right now Charles Scarff should be. I mean, there's no excuse for that guy not to make the roster. He was with us all last season on the practice squad. He was involved in the organized workouts that Lamar put on down in Florida. He's got the inside track. There's no reason why he shouldn't win this position. So even if you do bring a Delaney in, it's not a guarantee that they're going to make the roster. I think we have to take a hard look at a guy like Charles Scott only because of the shortened season, and he already knows the playbook, and it would be a seamless transition. But he's got to be able to play. Yeah,
the other one too. I mean, I guess we're talking about those two, but I wouldn't rule out Ed Dixon. I know it's a new system, but his familiarity with the Ravens and their confidence in it, and at least his blocking ability, right?
And he's still probably got some wheels.
Yeah, absolutely. And he's young. I think he's 32 or 33. Young in comparison to Delaney.
Yeah.
So, that knowing that part of it would be shored up is something to mention as well. But yeah, I agree with you. I mean, Scarff should have the inside track. There should be no reason why he isn't the lock for the number 3 and should be his to use or to lose. But I think we're going to need 4 guys that we can depend on at the end of the day for injury and based on how many of these guys that we use. Now, we've talked about Patrick Ricard's role being expanded, and that would be great. At the same time, we need Pat available for what Pat does, right? So I don't want to depend on that. While it'd be nice to have, I don't want to have to depend on him in certain situations and then risk, him getting injured, fatigue.
When you mean what he does, what do you mean by that?
So, like, Pat to me is a fullback, right? And so I don't want to depend on him as like. I know we've lined him up on the outside in the tight end position before, but I don't want to do that with too much frequency and then become reliant on that and then to expand his role too much to where he could get fatigued, he could get injured. Because what he does is not the easiest thing. He's not running routes in most situations. He's taking on big, huge athletic men and ramming bodies with them over and over again. So I don't know. I just don't want Pat to do too much and then kind of lose, run the risk of something happening there as well. So I think bringing in a 4th guy is super important. Also, we don't know anything about Eli Wolf, right? Like as far as a professional.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think he's got the book of being more of a receiver, right? Excuse me, right now. But yeah, I mean, we don't know. That could change once he gets to the league and gets different coaching and understands maybe the importance more of blocking. That maybe that wasn't relayed to him in college quite as much. But yeah, I mean, I think it's going to be an interesting decision to see who they go with. Because I think there's no doubt that they bring at least a body in. But then with the 80-man roster, it's not as easy just to bring a guy in because now you got to cut a guy to make room for him. So it'll be interesting to see who they decide to let go because I can't see him just letting Breland decide to walk away and then not bringing in somebody to replace him.
Right. So that's what I was going to ask you is that what is your confidence level like on a 1 through 10 that they're going to bring someone in, that they are? I mean, that they're not just going to roll with what they got. I mean, I think I'm at like a 6.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow. See, I mean, I'm more of like a 9. I think I'm very confident.
It's a foregone conclusion.
Yeah, I mean, not that they'll bring in a guy that's a guaranteed roster spot, but they'll definitely bring in a guy to compete. I mean, I just don't see why they would leave that tight end spot that's so important to them so thin. I would be surprised to see them bring nobody in, even if they do see great things from Charles Scarf and they feel like he's going to end up winning that job, just because you need camp bodies.
Right. Yeah. Well, it'll be interesting to see what happens. I think we're both rooting for Delaney. I think that would be awesome. I'd love for him to come over here and get a chip here with the Ravens. Not saying that we're going to win it, but I feel pretty confident. So, let us know your guys' thoughts. Is there anyone out there that we're missing? Anyone that is worth bringing up? Like Glenn said, make sure, you guys consider as well this short offseason, unprecedented offseason that we're going through as far as preparation time and ramp up. Is there anyone that we're missing? Anyone that we haven't named? Let us know what you think about the names that we threw out there, who you'd prefer, and make sure to hit that subscribe button. And we'll be back soon.
See you.